I'm the MMA king and I came for the crown. All your phonies and clowns need to move around. Cause I'ma put you in the dirt and have you come out looking brown. But it's okay, don't frown, cause I'm always gonna be around. So listen up, I'm only getting started. This is still the first round. Hello YouTubers, MMA community, the fans of the channel, and all you MMA betting sharks who want to make a killing off of the UFC Fight Island triple header coming up on the 16th, the 20th, and the 23rd, back to back to back. So excited. Can't tell you how many money-making opportunities there are. I always have been someone who tells you guys that if there's more than one event, I'm the Parlay King, right? And when you gave a Parlay King 3 separate events, that means 12 times 3. That's like 30, 40 fights in 1 week where you can choose the cream of the crop. You don't got to wait 3 weeks. You could do it in 1 week, inside of 1 week, choosing 3 events to pick the cream of the crop out of all 3 cards and combine it into making one great parlay that would look like a very risky one. Typically, anytime you want to combine like 7-8 fights inside of one card, it's going to be very unlikely unless you're me and you did it in, like, look at the first week I ever opened my Twitter account. I did that. I went 12 out of 12 on the Khabib card, 11 out of 12 on the next card, 11 out of 12 on the card before that. So besides, if you're a professional who could do things, and I gotta owe my success to this segment. This segment is the post weigh-in, post face-offs. I gotta be honest, man. If it wasn't for this part of the segment, if they didn't do these face-offs where I can examine so many important fine details that if I missed could sway me in the wrong direction and also not make me capable of being as confident in my picks as I already was. So many examples. I'll give you one. When, for example, we saw the Ferguson versus Oliveira face-offs, it was so apparent that Ferguson was not going to win that fight. Or Joseph Nathan Manez. I was so confident before that, but after seeing the size discrepancy, the confidence, the physique compared to length, it was inevitable that I knew it was a matter of time before he got the finish, not just the win. And we see 3-1 underdog. We cashed in on that one. Another one, another underdog we cashed in on, and I even made a live betting opportunity for my patrons. If you look back at my notifications, it's public for that post only. I opened it up. 3-1 underdog, Jonathan Pierce against Kamaka. Kamaka was coming up from a weight class, going up in the from his lower weight class, smaller weight class. We saw a huge difference in size, and it translated into the ring, the advantages that Pierce had over him, and he finished him in the later rounds as expected. So these face-offs, for a lot of reasons, like when we see somebody nervous, like I told you guys, that girl that was coming in from the, it was her debut fight, first Tisha Torres. I told you her opponent was so nervous. Or Justin Gain, the Guitar Hero. How many these things not only keep me comfortable and confirm, but I pick up on new things that make me able to go all in on fighters or hedge off of them. So let's start with a couple of observations that I picked up on the Holloway versus Kattar event coming up on the 16th, thanks to the face-offs and weigh-ins. My concerns about a guy like Matt Brown. Let's start with Matt Brown, okay? Matt Brown in 2017, if anybody recalls, he was going through a stage of just a bad fights, just bad performances, and he was contemplating retirement. And his family, as well as the advice of his doctors, the professionals who examined his head from x-rays and stuff that they're sport professional athletes doctors who like pick up on the CTE and all the stuff that is early signs of it. Well, they said that it was very dangerous and that he was having like concussions and all that stuff and headaches and stuff due to the types of damage he's sustained. He's not a very technical guy. This is a guy who's only really, he only wins fights from being gritty, tough, like a Nate Diaz type of a guy who can go and be out outlast his opponents in durability. He's always been very durable. He's not the most technical, best fighter, but his strength, his power is what's got him so far. And the reason he's still fighting at 40 years old is because power is the last thing that fades away. So you don't have to, he's never been the technical, he's only lasted because of the power and durability. But it's showing the more, it's going to get to the point where he, just like the Anderson Silvas and Shogun Rua, where we're going to see him at a point where UFC can keep explaining why they're letting him stay in the cards. And just same reason we have Carlton minuses and like how many fades that I told you had no business being inside the UFC. And like Marcin Pracino, he's like 0-3. He even gets knocked out. He's going to be on this card, or the next on the Fight Island card coming up soon. We'll talk about him, so that's why I wanted to mention him. 0-3 in the UFC. All 3 fights by first round knockout, and by guys who are not even knockout artists, who are actually still supposed to, who should be retiring themselves, like shells of themselves, like Sam Alves, are knocking him out, but they keep him around. They're still giving him fights on important events. They need guys like this, but unfortunately, it's going to get to the point. It's going to, like, once if you pay attention to the stuff that was happening on the scales, not only did I've seen too many face-offs, too many scales. I've seen too many people cut weight not to have observed all these signs. It's one thing if you can see 1 or 2 signs, but when you have 3 or 4 especially, and these were concerns that you were already thinking about before you've witnessed these signs, it's a confirmed done deal. There's nobody that can tell me it's a smart play to bet on Matt Brown. Win, lose, or draw, anybody betting on Matt Brown is a risk-taking, gambling man, low IQ, I have to say it, low IQ bettor or investor. We invest, we only pick smart plays here. Besides the fact that, let's think of the other spectrum. Well, let me finish telling you actually. Matt Brown, mind you, this is a guy who's got the most experience out of almost anybody in this card besides probably his opponent, but his opponent's younger. But he's been on this, he's done this song and dance, he's done this routine more than anybody else. He was one of the only people who couldn't listen to instructions or remember how to follow instructions and had to go on and off the scale like 2 times before he remembered that he has to give a flex. He's got to pose for the cameras before coming off of the scales. Not only did he forget it, not only did he do a very weak and fatigued flex with no effort, lackluster, low energy, he immediately tried to get right back off the scales. He was in a rush. His head was down the whole time, which made more sense for the next thing I'm going to say. He even lost his balance. He tripped over his own feet. He fell back, almost fell down. That's how, and he was looking down the whole time, which makes no sense. You couldn't have tripped over something. You're looking down, which just tells me that he's not durable. He's losing his balance. The brain damage issues that he was having in 2007 have just gotten worse, because you've seen that knockout against that young prospect, Miguel Baiza. He hurt him bad. And a guy who was already going through some damages, I don't think he's going to, same reason why Chris Weidman went from undefeated to a 6-fight losing streak after going through brain injury trauma from a Yoel Romero, which everybody says nobody's ever going to be the same after Yoel, which is why we saw a boring fight with him and Izzy, because Izzy's not stupid. He understands the risks of getting into, or look what happened to Paulo Costa. We never seen him the same after that fight. Or Robert Whittaker lost his belt because after that fight. So same type of situation. I don't expect to see a guy who was already on the decline, was dipping in, and is at an age right now that even if he didn't have those problems, you're going to start to see effects of Father Time, which is the one battle that you'll never win against. I told you everybody is going to lose that battle one day. It catches up to you. And even if you show some success and surprise people and battle through adversity, but from Father Time, he'll always win at the end. Well, this is the moment I think we're going to see him just lose flat out, because we have a Carlos Condit who's not only physically, from the Instagram post that I'm following, but in the weight, his interviews, the stuff I picked up. This guy's on his final fight of his contract. He knows that UFC is looking to try to take people away that are not big. He's never going to be a big, like, superstar. This guy is just one of the mediocre type of guys, and he knows his job is on the line. He's at the age right now. He's got to compensate for the disadvantages by giving extreme. Why do you think he showed in every moment of the fight against Court McGee? He kept control. He didn't take any risk. He won every minute of every round almost. And he was a slight underdog. We cashed in as an underdog for him, by the way. And that fight woke me up to, like, this is the guy who I want to see, because he's very underrated. His ground game, his grappling, his sprawl and brawl, his durability. This is not a guy who's easy to knock out. He's very tough. He's got some freaking wars, and he's came through them unscathed and just always championship level heart. Now he's worked under that layoff, that long time inactive. He was doing like what Brian Ortega did. He's worked on stuff that he needed to improve on, that, like I told you, like one day we're going to see even like the Aldos and the guys like Glover Teixeira, who at the later stages of their career, they started to come to terms with the fact they got to change their styles. They got to be different fighters to compensate for the areas that they're lacking in through because of the age between the gap and between them and their opponents. Well, this guy's going to be the younger guy. He's motivated. He knows he needs to put an impressive performance, like how we seen the cherry picking Pettis before he left the UFC. He wanted to make because he knew he was going to another organization. He had to do an impressive performance. We seen him at 110% against his opponent Moreno. But that's what I'm going to expect from Condit. Not only because he's just an overall better, well-rounded fighter. So, like, even both of them in their primes, I give it to a guy who's always been more closer to the top of the division, who was a former champion in his older organizations like WEC, where a lot of the greats came out of that organization. It's not like some fly-by-night shop. It's a very credible, excellent organization. He was the champion there for a while, defended it a couple times as well. So a guy like that is just a better, all well-rounded guy. He's in a better point of his career. He looked way better at the scales. He wasn't tripping over himself, having his head down, which shows lack of confidence. He was more motivated, and he's got incentive. He knows that if he does not just win, but win in impressive fashion. That's why, did you see, he was the first, this speaks in volumes. He was the first person on the scales. Yeah, and that speaks highly. Not only did he come in perfect weight, didn't even need the allowance, the extra weight. He came with his head held high, his big flex, which showed in the best shape, like I was saying, and I followed him on Instagram. He's putting a lot of work. His interviews, he seems confident. He's got a game plan. Mind you, this is a fight that's been rebooked 2 or 3 times, I believe, already. So maybe even, at least 2 or 3 times they've tried to make this fight, and he was preparing for it before it fell. So he studied this opponent, and he's spoken about how he knows exactly which game plan to implement. So this guy's already prepared to beat the 100% Matt Brown, who was in his prime. He knows how to beat that guy. I don't think he'll have a problem with this version of him especially. So moving on, we picked up everything that I was already aware of. We confirmed it with the scales and the face-offs both. Matt Brown should not be anywhere near the odds that he is at now. Carlos Condit, as usual, just like in his last fight as an underdog, they even brought him in, has got a lot of value. And I told you this card screams value. He's one of the best values on this card, one of my most confident picks as well. Unfortunately, I can't do the full picks and the full observations on this video. That's selected only for the patrons. I will still give you a couple of more, but the rest of them, if you want it, you got to see the private segment in the Patreon, and that way you can know who's the better, more confident picks that you can go all in on and win some money on this Saturday's events. And I do this every week, by the way, guys, and it'll be for all 3 events coming up. All right, so another guy who I don't like what I saw in the scales is Phil Hawes. Phil Hawes was very shaky. Even in the face-offs, he was shaking. His hands were not standing still. He just looked very nervous. And the funnier thing about it is he wasn't like that at the scales. He was very lackluster. He was very head down, eyes low, just very like empty. He just did not look confident, and he looked I don't even think it's the scales that he that was the problem. Although I do think that he did have a little bit of trouble on the scales as well, but he was in a rush. He didn't give a good flex. When he was time to flex, he did a very small, like weak type of a flex. His eyes were very droop, like lazy eyes. He was in a big rush. He didn't want to stay there. And I noticed, just like Matt Brown, immediately when he got off the scales, he was in a rush to get it. He went the wrong way. Matt Brown even chugged water. That's another bad sign I forgot to mention. When somebody's, before they even get off camera, they're already chugging water. That's a bad sign. Remember, at age, it's harder to cut weight. Your metabolism is not the same, and it's difficult for these kids. So they're working twice as hard as their opponents, which is why they're going to be less durable. Remember, I told you that person was not even going to, you could blow or slap her and she'll fall. She ends up quitting in between the rounds on the stool. She never got up. I see, or the games, I see the same thing. Or he came into the scales with his boxers. He was the only fighter who wasn't dressed up and had to undress. That told me that he was having trouble cutting weight, which is why he was one of the last people. I picked up signs similar to that. He's not having a good wake up, but even worse, half the battle is your confidence. If you're going into a fight not feeling energized, confident, you already lost the fight most likely. So I don't like what I saw, as opposed to his opponent who looked jacked, who looked confident, and has the bigger size advantage, reach advantage. So for those reasons, this is a fight you stay away from. You could take a shot at the underdog if you want, but I'm just not. His wrestling is way too good. He's way too strong. So even if he's having a bad weight cut, he's a collegiate level wrestler with the strength that he doesn't have to even be skilled. He can compensate for it, like the Kamzats, how they did. They could just pick somebody up and lay him drop him on the ground and and hover over them and keep them. So his style is a nightmare for a guy like Nazarene. So for that reason, I'm not going to tell you dog or pass. I'm just going to say you should either pass or just be very wary about how much you're going to invest, because both these guys have a path to victory. Their rightful favorite is not looking as confident and as good as I'd like to see him before his fight. So for those reasons, terrible fight to invest into. There's too many way better other opportunities that are less risky. So that's an observation we picked up there. Dusko Todorovic. I loved what I saw. I told you guys in his debut fight, this is a guy who's still young and in his prime, but he's a guy who comes off of an organization that was very respectable, good opponents. Like, for example, he was known as the Khabib of his organization. He was still undefeated, and he still is, but due to he's got great value on this card, not only because his last performance was kind of not his best, it was one of his worst performances, then mind you, he still was successful in not just getting a win, but getting a finish. He put inside the distance. He took out a guy who's only lost one other time before that inside the distance, and he was very durable, and the bigger guy, and a KO. But just like that victory, before that, and after his Michel Pereira victory, because he did beat guys that nobody else was able to put away. Michel Pereira, until this date, has never been. You've seen even Chaos Williams didn't have the success that he had. Chaos Williams was such a high-ranked, some people are high on prospect, that Dusko disposed, and he didn't do it with the lucky punch like people expected Chaos to probably do. He did it in accumulation and volume and just being the better striker, a guy who was more fluid, who's got the better strength, who's got the better footwork, who's got the better head movement. And Michel Pereira is a guy who's very good at that stuff. So to be better and outclass someone like that. And then after Michel Pereira, before Townsend, the last fight before he came into the UFC, he fought a guy who had 14 wins, 11 by finish, 10 by knockout. Annihilated him, took him out. Guys and he had only 3 losses at that time, 15. So he's not fight like Punal. If you look at his first win, the guy he beat was 4 losses, 0 wins. The guy after that was 6-4, 4-2. Another guy was 2-2 and 0. He has not fought nowhere near the level of competition. And the guys that he went to decision with, he couldn't put away. Mind you, this guy's only 7-0. One of his victories was a guy that is the only guy he's ever really fought that's UFC caliber, but very low level. And he's not a guy like we just saw him lose against another guy who's very new, not the highest level, Jamie Pickett, who just lost his debut fight in UFC against Stefan. That guy took him all 3 rounds to decision. A guy like that is similar to a guy like Takan Swanson. And we've seen what Dusko does to guys like Townsend. And you can see it in the face-offs and in the skills. He does this, it's a routine. It's like his thing that Punali does in all of his face-offs or scales. He does this weird kind of flex, or he shows his wings and muscles. He did that with so little it was so lackluster, so little energy, so little confidence. It didn't even look like a flex. It looked like he was just going through the motions of doing what he's usually doing and what he's supposed to do. But even in the face-offs, remember, guys, I fought 100 times in my life. I've seen it all. I've seen people that run away from fights. I've seen people who are forced to have to fight that they don't want to. I see the look. It's the same look. Why do you think poker stars wear glasses? Or some people wear glasses at face-offs, or some people just don't look at their opponents in the eyes, like the Oscar De La Hoyas who look up. His eyes don't lie. They said it all. He was sure that the other guy was the better fighter. He looked very sad. He looked like he was in a funeral. His eyes were just very worried, very concerned, as opposed to Dusko, who was laughing, smiling, winking. He was just very confident. He just looked strong, healthy, smiled, was confident. I seen it dripping all over his face, just oozing all over his face. It was confident written all over it. So I was already assured that he was going to be the better fighter who should win this fight, but at the value we're getting him at, especially when you have to. Another thing I picked up on Punali, when he got off the scales, he winced. He held his back. He winced and he held his back like he was in pain. He said, he didn't even hide it. And this is a guy who's coming off some big layoffs due to injuries that were very serious. I think he even had surgery off one of them that not even, let's forget about the fact he had concussions, which against the guy who hits as hard and who's durable as, and the guy, Dusko, does over 8 strikes per minute and only absorbs like 4 or 5. He's not going away. He's going to be in your face, non-stop forward pressure, have you on your back feet. He's going to be the one in control of the ring and control and aggression. You're in pain in the scales. You had pain already. What do you think is going to happen when Dusko puts his paws on you? So it's going to be ugly. I don't think he can even last. I thought that may go over, but when he showed me he was already in pain, he held his sides and winced at the scales, concerned me even more. A guy who's inactive. Another reason why we saw not the best performance of Dusko is because it was his first fight in the UFC. Now it's his second, so he's accustomed to the procedures. Punali, I told you as many times, when the guy's making his debut fight, there's other outside the fight circumstances that they got to battle through, adversity that they're not used to, the protocols, the procedures, not knowing that they can't leave out their room and they're limited to how they can weight cut. You could tell his weight cut went bad. This tone of his color, his eyes were glossy, another sign. But also just because it's his first fight, like I told you, so many other fighters who were going to have trouble before, that had nothing to do with their opponent's trouble that they'll be bringing. They also have the trouble of the stuff that's you're the new guy in school. It's your first day in school that somebody who's been there has to show you around. Well, the guy who's going to show him around the ring is going to be Dusko. This advantage that Dusko had in his last performance, including an inactivity. He had gone through a long layoff. It was one of his longest layoffs between his last fight and the fight, which is why it took him longer to get into the UFC, and there was pressure that he's been waiting for so long to get in on the big stage. That pressure is gone now. He doesn't have the pressure. He doesn't have, so the pressure is also going to go against Punali, who's got to worry about not being someone who loses his undefeated. He doesn't want to. He has to worry about the disadvantages in being the new guy. There's so many other reasons. There's disadvantages, and there's a lot of value on Dusko, who I can see even getting a finish, like in most of his. I think almost all of his fights are by finish, anyways, and very early finishes as well. Even Michelle P couldn't last too long with him. All right, guys. So we got Dusko there. Ramazan Imov, another guy who I wasn't very happy with how I see him for a 3-1 favorite, especially I'd be very concerned if I have my money on him. Not only because David Zawada is the bigger guy, the stronger guy, better physique, which is very important for a guy who's going to have to implement the game plan that Ramazan Emeev is going to have to try to implement to win this fight. Mind you, look at he was one of the biggest underdogs of the card against his last opponent, David Zawada, he fought against, I can't remember how to say his name. Anyways, Abdul something like it. It was a big name, and it was against the guy who's also like a Dagestani Abukar Nurmagomedov. So like another Russian type of Dagestani or Chechen type of a wrestling style who implements. He's gonna have the same. As soon as it went to the ground, because of the power discrepancy, he got the upset win, cashed in as one of the biggest underdogs. You would think that the odd makers learned their lessons. They gave him the same exact. This is not the first guy either. He's used to doing very well against opponents of this type of style, especially when I told you if you have a strength advantage. Look at the Tony Gravely and the Greatest fight. Everybody was against Tony Gravely. I said just because he's the kind of guy who could bench press more, even though he's smaller, or like Michael Chandler, I told you, who himself is telling the world, I can't wait to use my wrestling, my chain wrestling. Hooker's going to be in a world of trouble because this guy's got cardio for days. He's built like a tank. I don't want to get sidetracked. That's another segment. Let's get back on track. And so like the way he beat Abukar Nurmagomedov, who's a similar style type of a fighter from the same type of regions even as his new opponent, 3-1 underdog. I mean, I guess you could take a shot on him. I don't like either one of these fighters. Let's get this clear right now. Both of them have holes in their game that are very unforgivable at this level, but they are matched up perfectly. And if you ask me, and also due to the signs that I picked up at the scales, 2 times he had to get back on and off the scale. He was confused about what to do. When he did have to give the flex, like somebody had forced him to do the flex, he wasn't pumped up like he wanted to do it. It wasn't even a big flex. It was very weak. He looked fatigued. He looked very unconfident. He was looking down. He was in a rush. All the signs I don't like to see in a fighter at 3-1 favorite, especially, who's very slow. Like he was just like in his fights. He's very slow and predictable, and just the way he showed up at the scales is how I see him in a lot of his fights. I don't think he's fought as high of a level and battle through as much adversity as his opponent, who's got a pretty decent record as well. I just think that when they come together, it's going to be way too close of a fight, way too many holes in both of their games for neither one of them to be trusted at that rate, at that value. So if you have to bet this fight, this is the perfect example of what the term dog or pass is invented for. It's a dog or pass fight. I would probably think about maybe passing more so, but actually, you know, because of the pressure, you could see it in the confidence and this comfortability as opposed to Emeev, who did not look comfortable. They don't expect anybody at 3-1 underdog, one of the biggest underdogs. Nobody's expecting a big performance or a showcase from David Zawada. So having that freedom, that comfortably, is going to be in his favor. So I may take a shot at him as an underdog. It's real good value. Why not? Or put him in a small parlay, very safe one with some for sure fighters to get even more value. I can get it for like a 2 or 3 leg parlay, 6 or 7, maybe 8-1 odds. Win a nice few $100 off of a small wager that is basically just profits from the other fights that we're going to make anyway. So nothing to lose. Anyway, another guy who showed that same concern, actually, believe it or not, you could tell the pressure, the anxiety was written all over his face. He's very serious, not the usual laughing, joking type of a Max Holloway. This guy was very serious, concerned, even you can say a bit, but anxious is the better word. Even one of my patrons was, this is what I love about my Patreon. We got like 100 members almost now. Like it's a revolving, like some people like come in, and so we've had a few that didn't stick around that I had to remove them or for whatever reasons. But overall, like I noticed the people who have stuck around, like we're at a pretty high number right now. They're very knowledgeable. They help me, like even the things that I picked up, sometimes they mention it before I pick it, before I can even post about it. So I love the community that we've built. So I want to thank you guys. They make observations that are very similar. If I ever miss anything, I can be sure that they won't. And they help keep me sharp and motivated all the time. So Even like I was saying, some of my patrons picked it up that not just the Matt Brown tripped over himself, and also they picked up on the fact that Holloway just looked very serious and like anxious. You could tell, like, because he knows there's a lot of riding on this. Not only is he going up against an opponent who actually, for a change, has a reach advantage over him. There's a 2-inch reach advantage that Kattar, who is one of the best boxers of all time in UFC history. So he's had experience, or I'm sorry, he's had problems fighting and bad experience in fighting guys who don't have who have reach advantages or better boxing or just good boxing or durability. And a guy who's more powerful, like a Dustin Poirier or a Conor McGregor, you saw how much problems, even a smaller Volkanovski who beat him twice, you saw what types of problems he can possess to a guy like Holloway. So now Holloway's concerned. He knows that if he loses this fight after losing to the champ twice already, especially, he won't be back in the rankings. And this is a fighter who's got a lot of mileages on him. I know he's young still, but he's fought for so long that he doesn't have that. He's been in some battles that if he goes through too many more of these, and he loses, he's not going to have another chance at the belt for a long time, if ever again. So it's a very stacked division. A lot, the Ortegas, there's just too many killers. Yair Rodriguez there's a lot of real big threats. It's going to be hard for him to climb back into the rankings. He knows it. That pressure, that anxiety is weighing heavily on him. We didn't see him crack a smile. He was too serious. And if he's not having fun, if he's not loose, that's one of the biggest advantages Max has in his fights. His calmness, his confidence, his relax. He's the guy who's known for, quote, it is what it is. That mentality has been beneficial for a guy like him in his career. He doesn't have that anymore. Kattar's the guy who's got less to worry, but he's more confident. He's the better, stronger physique, bigger, longer. He's the kryptonite to Holloway. So at the odds that we're getting him at as an underdog especially, I know it's a close fight. I know either one of them could win. But for just the odds on it and being that it's just a smarter play. The smarter play is to go for Kattar. He's got even the better record. And we know that I've talked to people inside of his circle, the guys who train around him and by his side and with the people that he trains with. They're saying, and it shows in his physique, and the guy who's coming off of a 5-round banger, he showed that he's got the capabilities of being effective in even the later rounds. He doesn't fade away, but now I've been told that this guy's coming in as in the best shape of his life. He's never worked so hard, and this is a guy who's always been a hard worker. The Boston mentalities, all those people that come from that section, they're pretty hard workers. But him in particular, he shows to be making improvements still. He's still young, and I think this is going to be his breakout performance. This might be the one that's going to really put him out there on the map, and it's going to be a great fight. Don't get me wrong. Both of them, I think, will have moments in it, but I believe the more dangerous, the more durable, and the more confident guy right now is going to be him. So I would like to put my money on him if I had to. But again, this is not a fight you want to parlay. This is not a fight that you want to go too hard on. Just if you're going to take any tax, it's just a small wager, a couple units, whatever at most. But there's too many other better fights, mismatches, better values on the card to have to invest too much onto this one. But in the scales, I love how he looked. The flex, the confidence, I give him the edge. If it was a battle of just the face-offs, he won that fight already. And the confidence and everything, even in the stare downs, very, very confident, straight, focused. He was tunnel vision. I like what I saw. Signs of greatness to come. I can imagine already how that's going to translate inside the ring. And so let's go. Let's see who else are we going to talk about. We talked about the Zawada coming off one of his upset wins against a similar style opponent. All right. Oh, Jocelyn Edwards. I was really high on this girl. I love her performances that she's come for even before reaching UFC. She had some impressive wins and just very good performances. And she's rapidly on the incline. She's progressing her skills. her well-roundedness, her aggression, her fighting spirit, as well as her size and reach and strength advantage is going to play a big role. She started as a big underdog. When I told you guys about her, she was a huge underdog. Now I think she might be the favorite. So this is why it's important to put the reminders, the notifications for my channel. You want to get ahead of stuff like this. I told you guys when she was that she should have been the rightful favorite. I told you it was not even close. It was going to be levels to this, and now look at it. Now she's the favorite, if I'm not mistaken. So look at the difference that it can make if you have to see my videos a week later or a day or two later even. Time is money. It costs you guys money if you waited, or if you didn't watch my previous videos when I first touched on her before anybody else had ever talked about her. The only other person I seen talk about her picked another channel. I don't want to put him out there, but he's a guy who's got 15,000 subscribers, been around forever, around that area, maybe 10,000, 15, about 15,000. He picked Wu Yanan, another channel picked. And the people who picked Edwards after I already picked them, who I know follow my channel, who like are people who've complimented me, they didn't even have the correct reasons, or they weren't even confident the way they should have explained it. And that's what separates us, guys. I break these fights out. I don't go off of value. I don't go off of what other people are saying or what's supposed to be on paper that makes it look better. I know fights, guys. I see one fighter, how they fight and what their weaknesses and advantages are, and I put it together. I see the fight play out in my head. I don't have to even think about the odds or what other people's opinions are. And that's why when Luke, what's his name, against Joseph Manez with 80% of the votes, the tolls, 77 something percent picked Joseph Manez to lose. He was my biggest parlay piece as a 3-to-1 underdog. He was in 80% of my parlays. I never put anybody in that many parlays. Never. Very rarely, very few times. Like Lu, that Chinese girl, that small girl, Lokmas, I did her at one time because she had great value against, I think it was, I forgot who she fought against, but she, besides a very few times, I had Manez everywhere, and he was one of the biggest underdogs of the night. But it has no bearing on how I make my calls or what I make my decisions on. I see a fight. I'm too good at calling fights. I was a trainer. I was a fighter. I did follow sports. I watched the first UFC live event with Horace Gracie, and I never missed an event since then. The wisdom, the knowledge, I don't need to, I'm the guy that you guys go online to find out what they're saying to make your decision on. Why would I need to be the guy who needs to look at anybody else's decision? So anyways, so I'm the hardcore, if you know what I mean. But a little bit above that because of the experience. All right, guys, we got Felipe versus Felipe and Jacob. What's his name? How do you say his name? Sorry about the names. That's my only flaw here, guys. My names are not my thing. Anyways, Carlos Felipe and also Jacob Kilburn showed me the same thing. Not confident, very lackluster in energy, and just like they were forced to be there. They weren't happy to be there, as opposed to the last time when I seen Felipe against Jorgen de Castro. He was very geeked up, very pumped up. You could tell this fight, he was a smaller guy, even though, he's smaller, shorter. He's not, when the fight night comes, he's not going to be bigger, stronger. He's not going to be the longer guy. He's got too many disadvantages. He can see it. I can tell he's not confident in himself. And as a favorite, especially, and the guy who's not the more well-rounded fighter, who's got holes. This is a guy whose boxing is so bad, he had to resort to slapping his opponent. And the referee, if not for him pulling Jorgen de Castro off of the cage, from controlling him against the cage for as long as he was controlling him, and if it wasn't for that, I think he would have even lost the fight to Jorgen de Castro. But the referee made a bad decision, bad referee job. Even the commentators were saying, I don't understand why they keep pulling him off. Felipe, it was like seconds before, just after he got on the control against the cage, and the referee was already pulling him off, and he was striking, he was kicking, punching, he was doing work, and they still kept pulling him off over and over and over. And I think he had some injuries in that fight, so he tried to make it safe as possible for him. And if it wasn't due to their recency bias to beat a guy like Jorgen de Castro, they're valuing him as a favorite and more value than he's worth. He's not the worst fighter. He's got a decent heart. His fighting spirit and heart usually make up, and his high output volume makes up for his movement. He doesn't have good boxing, but he's got good movement, so it confuses people to make it look like, and they think that he's got good boxing. It's not boxing. He's a very bad boxer, but he's got good movement, which is different. If you know, if you're on the level of knowledge and I am in boxing, you know the difference between a good boxer. He doesn't throw them correctly. His punches are very sloppy. They're very predictable. They're very ineffective. You can take 1,000,000 of them and still keep coming forward without being damaged. They're just very. That's why he had to resort to not embarrassing himself. He had to start to slap his opponent to make it. And there was no beef. They didn't have any problems. They never even talked before. Why would you have to slap somebody in a fight? That never gave you any altercation. There was no altercation. Even as I was very confused why he was doing that. I know why he was doing that. You can't pull the wool over my eyes. You did it because you were embarrassed by how he was eating your punches and laughing. And it was not laughing. He didn't laugh, but it was a joke. Pretty much, he was ineffective. If it wasn't for points racking up, and if it wasn't for referees stopping Jorgen from implementing his very good game plan, like how Usman beat Jorge Masvidal and wins a lot of his fights. He was even doing foot stomps against Jorge, and the referee let it go. Well, this guy was doing punches and elbows, and the referee wouldn't even let it go for 10 seconds. Very odd. Very unusual. One of the weirdest things I've seen in refereeing. Anyways, but he's one of the biggest favorites of the night too. For maybe they needed to ruin some parlays. I don't know. But to be quite frank, I show you my bet slips. That was the only fight I had hedged on that whole card. I had perfect picks. The only fight that I said I'm going to hedge it because I don't trust Castro, it was the Felipe fight. I was so happy that I did that. So I still have a ticket that I can show you that I won a parlay, a beautiful big paying parlay with Felipe in it. It's on my Twitter. You can see it actually. Anyways, hit the like guys. Just don't forget. I mean, the video is not over yet, but I would like you please, because at the end you may forget. So I can keep coming with content and giving you guys free content, and these they keep coming out. I mean, hit the like, hit the subscribes, the notifications, but more importantly, leave a comment. If you leave a comment, I can keep coming back and doing more and more picks, more segments, more free content to help you guys make money. Because I do this, the free. I get paid to do this on my Patreon, so that's the difference. But over on YouTube, I don't get paid for this. This is just from the generosity of my heart. I wanted to help as many people as I can, and I'll keep doing that as long as I can be seen. My content is gonna get pushed. If you guys can hit not just the likes and subscribe, but make comments, whatever you want. You want to blow me a kiss, wave at me, say I hate your guts, fighting guru, or you suck, whatever you want. Don't say anything bad because they'll remove the comments for us. But something sweet. I'm just kidding. Just anything, a nice comment, or just opinions. If you have opinions, I'd love to hear what your opinions are about the weigh-ins, the scales, the face-offs, or just who you guys are picking. And I love to converse with MMA fans, because I love this sport, so it's very fun to open up and discuss those things. All right, guys, you guys got already a lot of picks. Don't forget, if you want the rest of them, if you want there's more observations, concerns, red flags, and stuff that we're going to focus on, only my patrons will be able to get. So hit the Patreon. It's a very small fee, and there's a special going on where you can get reimbursed. There's a parlay that's paying very good odds. If you if the parlay doesn't cash in, you could either get the $40 back, up to $40 back from the wager or your membership. If you want either way, you can get up to $40 back if the parlay that's paying plus 4-to-1 odds. 41 odds means if you bet $100, you win about 400 or something, maybe closer to 500 where it is right now. I don't know, I have to check, but could be up to $500 profit for a safe parlay. I'm so confident in it hitting. Remember, this is a guy who's hit 90-to-1 odd parlay, so 4-to-1 I do with my eyes closed. So I'm confident so much that I'm putting my money where my mouth is. If it doesn't cash in, you get reimbursed. There's a special that's expiring tomorrow or later today. I gotta look at the date. I think tomorrow. Thank you guys for joining me on my segment. This was a fun discussion, and I look forward to seeing you guys again in the near future. A lot more to talk about. Interviews I got lined up with some very cool talents in the UFC and Bellator. So stay tuned. A lot of fun stuff coming to the channel. Thank you guys for joining me. See you in the next segment. Good luck on your bets.